The first three chapters of the prophet Micah are kind of depressing because they're filled with judgment upon Judah and upon Jerusalem and all because of their corruption and their disobedience, their lack of faithfulness. But thankfully, from chapter 4 on, things get better. And it starts in chapter 4. Our verses for today are verses 1 and 2. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. Peoples shall stream to it, and many nations shall come and say, Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. Now, this vision of obedience and restoration and peace is the beginning of the rest of the book of Micah, which offers some hope that as the people become more obedient and seek to learn and be faithful to God's word, that the situation they're living under will improve. Part of what's interesting, and if these words sound at all familiar to you, it may be because verses 1 through 3 of Micah chapter 4 are found, they're duplicated in the book of Isaiah, in the prophet Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. It's kind of interesting, but maybe not totally surprising, that you have the same words being spoken by both Isaiah and Micah of this promise of restoration, of God once again establishing Jerusalem as the place where people are going to pilgrimage, they're going to come to, and even nations shall stream to it. And why do they come to Jerusalem? Well, it's because, as is stated in verse 2, so that the Lord may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. It's interesting that throughout many of the prophets, we hear the importance of having a humble, teachable spirit, that we are open to learning. It's a challenge, especially for us. The older we get, there's a danger that we can become more and more set in our ways, and our listening becomes more to see if a speaker or an article or an author, if they agree with what we already think. That can become our orientation more than us coming with a humble, teachable spirit, being open to learning and even changing our mind or changing our opinion. But it's not just enough to come that the Lord may teach us his ways, that we may hear it. From a prophet standpoint and a biblical standpoint, we haven't learned something until we do it. And so until we actually walk in God's ways, then we can say, the Lord has taught us and we have learned. I pray that God will give you a humble and a teachable spirit, as well as a desire to walk in God's good path.